Good evening. My name is Brian Collins, and I'm with Science Safety. I want to thank you for attending tonight's presentation, Holistic Safety Programs for Science, STEM, and CTE with an emphasis on new teachers. Our presenters tonight are internationally recognized authorities in the field of science, STEM, CTE, and safety education, Dr. Ken Roy and Dr. Tyler Love. Dr. Roy has been a valued member of the Glastonbury public school system in Connecticut and the safety officer and chief safety blogger for the Council of State Science Supervisors and CELA, NSTA, and ITEA. Dr. Love is a professor in the Faculty of Education, specializing in math and science at Penn State Harrisburg, and an OSHA trainer, safety committee member of NSTA and ITEA, as well as an author of multiple journals and articles regarding safety, liability, STEM, and CTE education. Earlier this year, our hosts, they co-authored a book called Safer Engineering and CTE Instruction, National STEM Education Imperative, which can be downloaded for free at sciencesafety.com. We're honored to have them present tonight's session in our ongoing series of professional development and learning webinars provided to you by Science Safety. During the presentation, please feel free to put your comments and any questions in the Q&A, and we will do our best to respond live during the session. Afterwards, we'll also have a discussion and open it up to more questions. Please mute your mic to minimize any background interference. With that said, we appreciate your interest in safety education. Dr. Ken and Dr. Tyler, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Brian. Again, I also want to welcome everyone for taking part in this very critical safety webinar. Especially for the new teachers who are going into the field. It's certainly a challenge, more now than ever before. And let me just start by saying, when we talk about safe, right? I just want to say one thing: you can't make it safe. This is a great way to start this program, I know, but I want to be right up front about that. You can only make it safer. Again, you can't make it safe. Things happen, unexpected things happen. But if you follow through with safety protocols involved in legal safety standards and better professional safety practices, certainly you will reduce and come close to eliminating any safety incidents or problems. This webinar is being facilitated by yours truly and Dr. Tyler Love, who are recognized both academic and practical safety educators who will take you on a journey through necessary safer, very good practices as a new teacher in science, STEM, CTE, and other disciplines, and how a holistic safety program can help you increase safety awareness and stay safer with your students during your career. Very quickly, Brian did go over this already. Again, as you know, I'm Director of Environmental Health and Safety. In that position, I'm the Chemical Hygiene Officer for the school district. I'm the designated Asbestos Compliance Coordinator, the PCB Program Coordinator, the SILA Compliance Coordinator, and a number of other things. So you have to be careful what you agree to, right? But it is a very important position. Obviously, I'm charged with the responsibility of helping to make it safer for all the students and for all the employees. Chief Safety Compliance Advisor for NSTA. I also am involved as the Chief Safety Blogger, National Science Education Leadership Association, Safety Compliance Officer, and the author of 13 plus science and STEM laboratory safety books and over 800 safety articles, professional journals, associations, and they're listed there.
And like Brian said, my name is Tyler Love. I work at Penn State University's Harrisburg campus in the capital of Pennsylvania, and I have my OSHA certified training credentials for general industry. Served on the NSTA Safety Advisory Board with Ken and others for a number of years now, and have done a lot of work in terms of safety for IT, EEA, and in terms of the T and the E in STEM, as well as looking at safety from a research perspective. And I'll talk about some of our latest findings and looking at things that are correlated with accidents and safety statistics, so we can try to improve those situations.
Okay, so what are the topics we're going to cover in the next few minutes? 4, ideal safety program components for educators. Again, ideal safety program components. New teacher requirements from employer. And there are going to be requirements, and this is usually directed by OSHA. If you're in an OSHA state, if you're in a private school, you will be under federal OSHA. If you're in a public school, you probably are under a state OSHA plan, which actually you probably have more protection, or you might be in the Department of Labor, who has chosen not to be under OSHA. But the point is, you are under a type of situation where it is supposed to be making it safer for you as an employee, not only your students, but also you. Part of that comes from performing hazard assessment and risk analysis. And we'll take a look at that because that's really critical. That's the piece that's going to make it safer. And the holistic approach to safety awareness and compliance. So let's take a look. And by the way, nothing is staged. All of these are actual in the trenches photo types of things. Take a look at this image from a safety perspective. What is considered correct versus incorrect in this image, right? Now, if they're dealing with glassware, which they are, if they're dealing with chemicals, potentially hazardous chemicals, you'll notice, what don't they have? Well, they have safety glasses on. Safety glasses are useless in a splash. You need to understand that, all right? When you're dealing with liquid hazards and there's a splash, you need a border that is going to be sealed. That only is found with indirectly vented chemical splash goggles. So one of the first things that you need to make sure in your lab before you do any kind of activity, if you're using liquid hazards, and I might also say biological hazards, all right, you want to make sure you have indirectly vented chemical splash goggles. If those really are hazardous types of chemicals, they also need to have on nitrile gloves, all right, which are non-latex, certainly, and also more than likely an apron just to cover up the rest of the body, all right? So those are key things here that you can see are missing. This image, well, right off, you're going to know from the previous one, they have on safety glasses. Useless, all right? Can't help you, cannot help you if there's a splash. Not good. You'll also notice they do have on lab coats, so that is a good thing. They do have on lab coats. They do not have on gloves. Remember, if that liquid gets on their hand, potentially, if it's caustic, if it's an acid, this or whatever, it can burn. One other thing I want to note here, all right? You notice the young lady in the right-hand corner. Her hair is hanging down. Not good. Protocol requires long hair to be pulled back behind the neck. The reason being, if she was to somehow dip the hair in a caustic chemical, if she was to get over a burner, Bunsen burner, she'll go up in flames. All right, so you want to make sure the hair is pulled back. So we have a number of things here also. And these are kinds of things that you need to make sure are in place before students even begin their hands-on activities. In this particular case, now, good news, they have on indirectly vented chemical splash goggles. All right, 10 points. Again, hands are not protected. Look at the hair on the young lady straight back there in the stripe. Again, hanging right down, very dangerous, right? Needs to be pulled back and tied. And also, again, we need gloves in this particular case. So this kind of gives you a feel for the kinds of things that you are responsible for, not only the students, but you're responsible. And remember, the kinds of things for personal protective equipment, like goggles, are under OSHA, but that's for an employee, the teacher. It's not for the student, all right? The student comes from a goggle statute that your state more than likely has, so you need to find that out. And also under better professional safety practice, which in the courts is the same as legal safety standards. You go to the NSTA, for example, on their, I think there that you will find a listing of a variety of safety protocols, and they list the personal protective equipment and those kinds of things. new teacher safety. All right. As a new teacher, there are some critically important safety aspects to your role in the school that are expected to be provided from your employer under OSHA laws. Again, most are under OSHA laws. If you're not, technically you still have to do it. And the reason you still have to do it is for the simple fact that these are also better professional safety practices, right? So OSHA laws, even though your state might have adopted them, they're still considered better professional safety practices that need to be done. Safety training. OSHA requires your employer to provide you with safety training, right? And this is an annual event. If you're changing assignment, if you're changing hazardous chemicals, there's all sorts of reasons that OSHA has there, but the bottom line is it needs to be an annual event. Chemical and environmental hygiene plan that is current and contains standard operating procedures and other necessary information, again, part of the OSHA laboratory standard, which you are under. If you are in tech ed, if you're in art, even though you have hazardous chemicals, there's nowhere near the type and the depth of the chemicals, the strength of the chemicals that you would find in science. So they're under the HAZCOM, or the right to understand. You are under the laboratory standard, which again requires a chemical hygiene plan. I might also add a chemical hygiene officer to oversee that. And safety items and functional engineering controls in place before you start teaching. Engineering controls, types of engineering are going to help protect you and your students. Ventilation, an eye wash station, a shower, shutoffs, all these types of things are considered engineering controls. And that's the number one thing that you need to make sure is in place. So holistic school district STEAM safety program, right? And again, it doesn't matter if it's STEAM, it doesn't matter if it's science, they're basically the same, right? So if we start on the left, administrator, educator, student PD annually. All right, we've already said that. You need professional development annually. CHP, chemical hygiene plan and safety manual, annual review. Now, usually the chemical hygiene officer is the one that, in fact, would update that procedure. Sometimes I'll go into school, I do mock OSHA inspections. I'll go in there, sometimes they're 10, 15 years old, haven't been looked at. Bad, really bad. All right, lab safety acknowledgement form annually for all students. This is like a contract, except they don't use the term contract because students under 18 or age of majority, whatever it is in your particular state, do not fall under contract specifically, but they do fall under what we call safety acknowledgement forms. And again, those are available with NSTA and other places like Science Safety Incorporated, right? And the student would sign that, and this is after the training. You do safety training for, this is before they pick up a test tube, before they look through a microscope. Want to make sure that that's done. Then the teacher needs to do a hazard analysis and risk assessment for every activity. You want to make sure you have a handle. What is the hazards that are available and what are potentially the resulting risks should you have students do that activity? And then you need to take the appropriate action. All right, you need to take the appropriate action. Part of appropriate action is appropriate PPE, personal protective equipment, for every person in the lab. Then shared current chemical inventory, SDS, very important. Make sure all the teachers know what's there. Important is, and also make sure that the local fire marshal has a list of your chemicals, just in case something happens and the firefighters need to get in there. They need to have that information available, actually, for their life and limb. Annual safety physical inspection, minimal of at least once a year. This usually the chemical hygiene officer would go through, sometimes in some school districts, it's along with the fire marshal. And they need to make sure that everything's, do you have proper signage? Do you have proper engineering controls? Are they functioning appropriately, et cetera, those kinds of things. And lastly, here you can see chemical storage and secured safety cabinets. Security is absolutely critical in science and STEM and STEAM, all of them, right? The problem for you, because you're the one responsible for that, the problem is if you do not have them secured, your chemical storeroom, for example, your chemical cabinets, if they do not have locks, you got a problem. Because if a kid gets in there, one of your students gets in there, takes a chemical, gets hurt, you are legally it along with the administration, all right? So you've got to make sure, and whenever you leave your lab, always secure it, always lock that door. I don't care if it's a 2-minute bio break, right? You want to make sure that no one can get in there. If they break in, not your problem per se, all right? So make sure that it is secured. Okay, essential science laboratory safety resources. Some of these documents are often overlooked, but are mandated to be reviewed and managed annually, right? So we're looking at the Science Safety Manual, right? Now you may have a separate manual for safety that includes the chemical hygiene plan, right? Or you may have the two of them separately, as it says here, right? Do you have Science Safety Manual that is specific to your district? Very important. Are you using the Department of Education state version? Do teachers know about it, and do they have access to this document? They better. When was this manual reviewed and updated? That should be annually, like last year. Chemical hygiene plan. Is this current chemical hygiene plan in your district? Is it reviewed annually by the chemical hygiene officer, safety committee members, standing operating procedures listed, or adjustments made for COVID protocol? COVID is still here. It hasn't gone away. It's better, but it hasn't gone away. Safety acknowledgement form. All right, again, all these things are listed relative to safety acknowledgement form. You want to make sure that things are done appropriately in a timely fashion. This always after the kids have been trained, all right? And every year, and some teachers go, well, they've had science for 5, 6, 7 or more years. Why do they have to do it every year? Because kids forget. Not only that, the acknowledgement form may change. One for science of physics is different from the science of chemistry, is different from the science of biology, general science, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, every year. And you hold on to those for at least 3 years, whatever the age of majority is. You need to do that, because in case you get sued, and that's a possibility if there's an accident, this is going to help save your butt in the courtroom, because you told the students and they signed off saying they knew that these were the safety protocols that they were required to follow. And annual physical safety inspections, we already talked about that. Again, do you have some type of district form? Who's going to perform the walkthrough, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, so this is the book that Ken and I co-authored. Was released in May of 2020, or sorry, in May of 2022, this past May. And it was basically a description of the findings from a national safety study that we did. So in 2020, right before COVID closed down schools, we had sent out a survey nationwide, and we were really interested in anyone that was teaching STEM, specifically those who were teaching engineering practices, which could encompass career and technical education. So if you think of like agriculture, biotechnology, construction, manufacturing, all those areas would fall underneath CTE umbrellas, the umbrella there. And then in terms of engineering practices with NGSS, you know that the next generation science standards, the engineering practices are included within the NGSS. So looking at STEM from that perspective, which the book talks about, and looking at safety and trying to get an idea of what the status of safety was in schools across the United States. So as the book talks about, this is a free download. Like Brian said, you can find it through the Science Safety webpage. And it's a free download. It has a lot of information in there. One of the things that you'll see in there is the beginning talks a little about this crossover and a lot of the overlap between science education, engineering education, and career and technical education, and how those areas can benefit from some of the findings and some of the literature that's out there on safety practices. So that's there. You can access it, and hopefully from that book, I'll go through some of the findings here real quickly. There are some of the key findings, but the idea from that book was to, one, give us an idea of the status of safety in schools in terms of STEM education and teachers that were teaching STEM concepts, but also provide some support. So when your administration says, well, why do you need more safety glasses or safety goggles? There's a whole page in there dedicated to eye protection, and it talks about why eye protection is required. So in the facts and the data that's in there, it also has a lot of explanations and links to resources to help teachers to advocate, or administrators to advocate to their school board why they need these safety precautions in place and these practices. So that was one of the goals of that. So this study included 718 teachers from the US from 42 different states. And some of the key findings here we'll go through quickly. 93% of teachers who participated in the survey said that they had a safety plan within their curriculum. However, 12% did not provide safety training to their students prior to participating in lab activities, which should be occurring all the time. Students should be receiving training from the instructor before they are participating in any activities. 11% did not require a safety test prior to working in the lab, which is another big no-no. That number should be 100%. And 33% of respondents said that they did not require 100% on safety tests. So again, these are all items that are documentation if something were to happen, and you're covering yourself by having these in place.
Next.
Yep. So some more key findings here. 35% of teachers did not have any formalized safety training. So I'll talk a little bit about what we termed as comprehensive safety training, but in this case, 35% of the respondents said they did not have a formal safety training experience, whether it's from their district or their higher education experience. So that one of the things that we found from our research is that that's becoming a growing issue as we have these teacher shortages in multiple states. So my role in teacher preparation at the higher ed level, we're really feeling the pinch in terms of trying to get more individuals interested in teaching and trying to fulfill these gaps and these shortages. And so what we're finding is a lot of people are coming into teaching through alternative licensure. And in some states, like in Maryland, where I taught previously, you could get alternative licensure through a 4-course pathway, as opposed to someone who went through a 4-year, 120 credit teacher education program. 4 courses could get you alternative licensure in some cases. So in those cases, teachers may not have safety training, and that's a big issue for the district to address, and also for the teacher to make sure that they're getting the training that they need. 69% of teachers did not use a safety contract or safety acknowledgement form with their students, which again is more paperwork to build that legal safety paper trail. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but in our research, we found that this reaffirms some of the research by Sandra West and colleagues that was done back in 2002, 2003. But as class sizes rose above 24 students, accident rates increased. And 58% of teachers could not recall the last time that they had an annual safety inspection in their school, which again is a big no-no. There should be safety inspections occurring every year, if not every semester. And 31% did not have SDS management system in place, which again is another big no-no. If a student gets a chemical in their eye or ingests something, the school nurse and the teacher in the classroom is going to need to have that SDS information so that they can provide the correct care for the student. Next. More findings. 41% of the schools performed a chemical inventory annually. That should be every school that has chemicals should be performing an annual inventory. 37% were unsure how they dispose of chemicals in their district. Again, this is a big issue. So one of the big issues is that teachers will accept chemicals and materials from industry partners or places that are getting rid of things. And you have to be very careful about that, because once you accept those materials, you're responsible for those from cradle to grave. And so sometimes it can be more costly accepting things that are quote unquote free, as opposed to checking into them first and making sure that the disposal is not going to be extremely costly. This one was really interesting. This is a pretty big finding. So 57% of schools said that they had a class or classes that had more than 25 students. However, when we asked them what was the square footage of their lab that they were using or their classroom, only 26% indicated that they had the square footage to host 25 students or more. So that's about a 30% difference in teachers that had over 25 students and teachers that had the classroom space to host that many students. So that means 30% of those teachers that had over 25 students did not have the square footage as required by the fire code, NFPA 101, to safely host that number of students. And that's a big issue. Overcrowding, as you see there at the bottom, was what teachers felt was the second greatest cause of accidents in schools. They felt that overcrowding was number two. They felt that number one was students not following directions that were given to them in the safety procedures. So, and again, 86% have a fire extinguisher. That should be 100%. And the other one there, it's interesting, 77% of accidents involve students. So that means the other 33% of accidents there could have included, or sorry, 23% could have included teachers, could have included visitors, which again reiterates why PPE and proper safety protocols need to be instituted, because anyone that steps foot in your lab or in your classroom is potentially at risk. Next slide, please. So again, 45% of schools have indirectly vented splash goggles for working with liquids. 83% had safety glasses with side shields, working with students with solids. Those numbers are really low. They should be 100%. I don't understand how 83% of the teachers, only 83% had the safety glasses working in CT engineering and STEM labs. That should be 100%, especially with as cheap as they are, making sure they have that ANSI rating listed there. 51% of schools had an injury or litigation within the past 5 years. 80% of science and STEM teachers reported having at least one injury in their class within the past year. 62% of teachers regarded students not following instructions as the greatest cause, which I had mentioned previously. Next slide, please. All right, and so this is the last slide with the findings. I know that was a lot of data, but we had, if you look at the book, there's bundles and bundles of findings in there. And then we present those findings to give an idea of what is going on in classrooms in America and labs in America, but then we go into detail about why those are issues and why they should have this, that, and other. So if you read the descriptions, it gives a lot more detail about what those statistics mean and why they're important. This here's the cover of Safety Science for one of the articles that we have in press. We then took the data. So in the book, we present basically descriptive statistics, which means we have the number of participants that responded a certain way and the percentage that amounted to. So we have very basic broad data in there. We then took the findings and we did some statistical analyses. We did what's called logistic regression and some correlational measures to look a little deeper. What we found in those statistical analyses and in this article that's coming out is that there were 8 factors that were significantly correlated with increased accident rates and 17 safety factors that were significantly correlated with reduced accident rates. So some of the things that were included with they were correlated with reducing accident rates were things like safety glasses. If they had safety glasses for every student that they required them to wear, if they had safety zones on the floor marking areas, hazardous areas where students need to be careful. Those were some of the reduction factors. We also found one of the biggest findings from this data. Remember, we had over 700 teachers, and we looked at all the responses, ran these analyses. We found that we did what's called an odds ratio, so you can see how likely a scenario is to happen. And in doing that, we found that teachers that had classes with over 24 students were 48% more likely to have an accident occur. So that's a huge finding. If you had over 24 students in your class, you were almost twice as likely to have an accident occur. We also found that Teachers who had comprehensive safety training, and I'll explain what that means in a second, were 49% less likely to have had an accident occur or have reported an accident occurring for that 5-year span. So comprehensive safety training, when we looked at the different forms of safety training that people reported, we had, if they had safety training in their undergraduate or graduate experience, if they had safety training upon initial hiring from their school district or their employer, and if they had a safety training update within the past 5 years. So when we looked at those separately, there was not a significant difference. But when we combined them all together and said a teacher must have all 3 of those to be considered in that comprehensive safety training category, that's what created that 49% reduction in odds. So moral of the story is teachers and school districts need to make sure that they're providing that training for educators at those 3 levels. So at the coursework level, at the initial training, every time a new hazard is introduced or a new teaching assignment is introduced, and also updates. There should be safety updates occurring at least once a year with new topics and new safety features that need to be covered. So you'll see at the bottom there, there's a DOI link to a paper that talks about those 8 factors and 17 reduction factors. If you're interested in that, you can access that paper. It's online right now. And this article from Safety Science then will be coming out probably within the next couple of months. Ken, do you have anything else that you want to add?
I think we're good. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, hazards and risks. You look at these pictures on the right, things are not good here. All right, these shelves are screaming, we need help. Look at the corrosion, look at the lack of being able to read some of these labels, the oozing of the chemical out of the containers, not good. Please don't ever have a chemical storage area like this. It can be very, very dangerous. Are you aware that what you look for when students or staff members bring you an outline of their inquiry-based activity? Because sometimes if it's one where they are going to come up with the directions and the like, you know, what are they going to do? What are they going to prove? How are they going to prove it? You've got to make sure that the safety piece is in there. All right. You need to evaluate the educational value of the activity or items used against the risks. Here we come back to risks again. Looking at this procedure, suggested materials, equipment, possible chemicals, or biological specimens that are a handful of red flag items or processes that you should recognize and prevent students from continuing onward in their planned pursuit of knowledge. All right, let's look at some of these risks. All right, items that STEM programs should not. And this is not just STEM, again, it's STEAM, it's science, and other areas that use hazardous chemicals. I'm not going to go through all of these, but for example, right off, alcohol burners. Please, you had alcohol burners, get rid of them. They're extremely hazardous. I couldn't tell you how many cases I see where the teacher and or the students are burned dramatically from the alcohol splashing and it's ignited, right? You should not be doing bacteria, using live bacteria cultures, K through 12, except possibly advanced biology. Middle school, sometimes I see that you're looking for trouble. All right, you just don't do it. Same with body fluids, you just don't do it. All right, bloodborne pathogens. All right, got to be careful for common allergens. A lot of these kids, sometimes even the teacher has medical issues relative to these allergens. So got to be careful with mold, pollen, and these types of things. If you're in biology, you're going to have some challenges. Flammable liquids, same kind of thing. Alcohols, all right, flammables, you got to be very, very keen. So ethers especially, all right. Formaldehyde, when used, you may still find it, get rid of if you have it, and on and on. You can take a look at these certainly, but these are all things that you should not be dealing with as a new teacher. The AAA approach, all right, driving home safety. The method requires teachers to perform a hazard analysis before each demonstration, as mandated by standard 45 of the NFPA, all right? Then conduct a hazard assessment, all right? That should be risk assessment, by the way, and take the best possible safety action. Knows what are the risks resulting from those hazards, right? In order to perform this 3-step approach to understanding and evaluating hazards, you must follow the steps sequentially. Here we go. AAA approach. Hazard analysis. Again, remember there are three kinds of hazards: physical, chemical, and biological. Physical, chemical, and biological. And these are the areas, if you look, the SDS, looking in your chemical hygiene plan, trusted safety authorities, maybe hopefully you should have a chemical hygiene officer. And again, you can go to science safety information. You can also go to the NSTA, the American Chemical Society, and CELA, and a number of other places. From there, those potential hazards, well, what are the resulting risks? All right, again, it tells you specifically in the safety data sheets what sections would be helpful in getting this information, such as hazards, fire safety, accidental spill information, etc. And then the last thing is, what is the safety action that you need to take to make it safer? All right, and that may result with just totally eliminating the hazard. Don't do it. All right, find an alternative. Change the PPE, change the administrative procedures, the different PPE, whatever, right? Those are all safety actions, again, to make it safer. Holistic approach. Science Safety has developed an integrated strategic approach to your school safety program that starts with individualized training that is made for each grade level and subject area. A digital student safety contract, again, we call it a safety acknowledgement form, management system, virtual safety assistant for annual safety inspections. This is priceless, trust me. Chemical inventory, again, priceless for management system, all right? All these things to help make it safer. If you don't have them in your school, you need to be the voice of reason, of information. You have to teach, tutor, whatever you want to call it, your administration, so they understand that their responsibility is to make sure you have these things. We also review safety manuals, chemical hygiene plans, training systems, collaborate with schools and districts to enhance safety and facilitate and increase safety awareness for all members of the school ecosystem. Science safety, holistic training and solutions. Again, looking here, we're talking about virtual training, all right? Great opportunity. You do it anytime you want. Safety audits, again, very important to make sure you know what you're dealing with. Contract management, again, safety acknowledgement form, remember that, and they provide those. And depending upon your state would dictate the age and how long you have to hold on to these things to help protect you against lawsuits. And inventory issues, all right? Chemical inventory management analysis, have an accurate chemical inventory with GHS, globally harmonized system labels, and accompanying SDS is a legal requirement, absolutely, all right? And that's with the updated HAZCOM through OSHA that came into effect in 2016. Safety awareness. Science Safety has developed the scalable learning environment that is easy to use. This is the key part here. Let me tell you, accessibility. All right, accessibility. It's on your time schedule, not the schools, and convenient for all ages with built-in learning motivators, badges, awards, micro-credentials, real certificates for participants. We help to evaluate school and school district-wide safety awareness through delivering consistent and synchronous learning moments that are topical, relevant, and current in K-12 teaching environments. We have designed the learning pathways and individual module objectives for reporting purposes. Again, priceless. Reporting. Your employer has to report a number of things relative to safety that they're doing to the insurance company, to their state, and a number of others, sometimes even the federal government, the EPA, for example, all these types of things, right? So you can see they're there to help make this a little bit easier for you, a lot easier, not a little. Learning pathways, you understand every teacher and student is a unique individual, so we provide personalized learning that is age, grade, subject matter appropriate, using a blend of traditional, virtual, video, animation, and so I mean, there's a spectrum right there. You can't beat it. Pathways are prescribed modular lessons on topics pertinent to the learner and their needs. Currently have over 350 individual modules, 350, and over 4,000 discrete lessons that support the content related to safety and hazard awareness training and micro-credentials, badging, and verifiable certificate authorization upon completion of the module, right? Which many times you need to provide, sometimes that's a state even requirement, never mind a local type of requirement. Contact information, all right, there it is. There's the site for sciencesafety.com. You can call on the phone and you can email in these areas. So they have accessibility no matter what the format. And there you have it.
Ken, one thing I would add as we were going through the slides, if you think about the safety findings that we presented from that recent study, a national study, and you think about the discrepancies and the shortages that were highlighted, a lot of those things are addressed by those resources from Science Safety. So if you look at the items that we talked about at the end there, they directly address a lot of those shortage areas and those areas in need. So
Definitely.
that's it's good to see that those resources are available for you, and they're there to help make things safer and address some of those areas that we found were lacking in schools within our study.
And it's rare to find another location, very honestly, that has all those resources in one place. So totally tip my hat to your recommendation. Brian?
Thank you too. We do have some questions and open it up again in our Q&A. One of those questions that came in, what is the best thing you suggest for a new STEM teacher to do in order to be safer?
I'm sorry, can you repeat part of that?
Yeah, but what is the best thing you suggest for a new STEM teacher to do in order to be safer in the classroom?
Well, first of all, you need to look at the district's either chemical hygiene plan and or safety plan. You need to make sure that your district provides you with safety training very early in the game, and don't be shy about asking for it. Also, look at sites on the internet. There has to be, because again, you're either licensed or certified or whatever. Don't be shy about looking on the internet. There's a lot of good stuff out there. Again, if I've mentioned a number of the associations, in addition, most certainly to Science Safety, but the NSTA, ACS, and a number of others, ITEEA, and CELA. It's a whole bunch of them out there. And those are all of the better professional safety practice sites. So those are things you've got to somehow self-educate. If you're the typical science newbie, you're coming from not all, but many of the universities with little or no science training relative to safety. All right, and that's sad. And I know this personally because I was a science director and I was a teacher, physics and chemistry, and I had a number of student teachers through my career. And let me tell you, it's thrown them to the lions. They just had little or no experience, no knowledge dealing with safety. So some are starting at ground zero, and don't expect for one moment that your school district is going to pick up and run for you with it, because a number of those, they don't do it. And this is how accidents occur. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Another question about safety glasses versus goggles. The educator is at a school where the labs have safety glasses and goggles. Is that a big issue? Do they need to be replaced?
Do they need to be replaced?
Yeah, safety glasses. So should they be purchasing goggles and getting rid of the safety glasses?
Well, it depends. For an area like, again, if this is a high school, if it's a physics class they're doing, 99% of the time, they will need safety glasses with side shields, but they'll need safety glasses. So that's appropriate because those are all physical hazards. If they're teaching biology and chemistry, now we're talking about liquid, talking about biological and chemical hazards. They need indirectly vented chemical splash goggles. The problem for the teacher, if you use the wrong kind of PPE, let's say you use safety glasses in a chem lab, and the kid gets blinded or the sides get injured somehow, you're going to be it legally because you are the one that's responsible. You're the one that's supposed to know. All right. You're the one that's supposed to know what is appropriate. What's the appropriate safety action needs to be taken for those kinds of hazards and risks. If you go ahead, and I'm just giving you advisory, if you go ahead and still do your labs in chemistry, for example, or biology, using safety glasses because the administrator, the principal of the school told you, oh, don't worry about it, you can't be sued. That's a falsehood. You most certainly can be sued when it comes to lack of safety. All right. So you just tell them, I cannot do the activity. I don't care what the curriculum says. I can't do the activity because I don't have the proper PPE. Give me the money, I'll order the proper PPE, and then we're good. Don't do it unless you have the appropriate PPE. Brian?
Great. So how many injuries are reported versus unreported? This person said that they heard there is no central system for reporting accidents in science, STEM, or CTE rooms. Is that true?
Absolutely true. It's not like the hospitals you go in and you're shot and there's a national statistic on that. There's not one dealing, at least on the government end, dealing with accidents, safety accidents, incidents, whatever you want to call it, in science and any kind of labs, actually. So that's a problem. And usually this is why people join these associations and the like, so they'll have access to that kind of information. I would also urge you to take a look at my Twitter, I think that I provided. Because on that Twitter account, what you have there, Dr. Royd's Safer Side, I go 5 days a week, and every time there's an accident that I become aware of, and I look all the time for those kinds of things, I put it right out there so you're aware of it, and you can go to the article that's on it, and basically it will help you not to have the same kind of experience.
We'll make sure you share that. We'll share your Twitter information. Sorry, Tyler, go ahead.
Oh, the other thing I was going to add is it's really hard to track too from like a legal aspect, the number of cases that are from safety accidents. So, you know, if an accident occurs and the student's attorney settle out of court, you know, that won't show up in the case law. So it's a lot harder sometimes in the legal aspect, how many accidents there were as well. So there's no central system, and you know, things may be underreported, which is why with our survey, we made sure that there was anonymity involved, and so teachers could provide, and there were teachers that did provide some very candid information that were definitely very interested in safety and had some strong things to say about safety within their school district. But that's the type of feedback that we wanted in that survey, to try to get as much of the real information as we could, but it is hard to track it.
Thank you. Is there like a dangerous grade or a group of a class that schools should be especially mindful of?
I think it was 9th grade, Tyler, correct?
Yeah, I think the research shows that 9th grade had a higher rate of accidents than other grade levels. And so,
yeah, why that might be.
I have to read into it more, you know, but I mean, I don't want to make any speculations about why, but you know, that is what that study indicated, was that 9th grade was the point where students were experiencing more accidents. I don't know if it's because moving to the high school level, teachers felt like they could trust the students more, and so they gave them a little bit more leeway. I'm not sure what the rationale was or what the cause was, but you know, there's certainly some hypotheses we could make.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might also be a maturation issue, which you find certainly at the middle school and early at the high school grades. Once you start getting into the upper grades at the high school, you get kids, you know, they're old enough to get driver's license. They have an understanding of what it is to make sure you are responsible, and the like. Again, this is only speculation, and also anecdotally based on my own experience, because I have through my career at times taught 9th grade. Teaching a 9th grader is a big difference between teaching an 11th and 12th grader when it comes to responsibility.
Just a couple more questions. I see trying to be mindful of the time. So chemicals in the storage room. What if there's an issue, a smell, or something's looking old and dangerous? Who does the teacher tell?
Teacher needs to, first of all, not let it get to that point if at all possible. You may have a ventilation issue. The NFPA 45 standard requires science laboratories, prep rooms, and storerooms to have ongoing ventilation. Number one, it must be continuous, and it must not be recycled to any other part of the building. It just comes in, fresh air, 100% fresh air, and then it goes out. Understand, if I teach math class, I only have about 20% fresh air. I have 80% or so recycled air from other parts of the building. Can you imagine stuff coming from the chem lab going into the math class if it was not directly going out? You know, that's a bad news deal. If you do find this, you should report it to the chemical hygiene officer. You should report it to your supervisor and also to your principal. Advice, always put it in writing. You can tell them verbally, but then follow up. Make sure it's in writing that there are these issues. And if this is the case, if this is a case in your lab, I know you said the storm, but if it's in a case in your lab, you need to be very careful about doing any kinds of activities. You need to put a stop on them if they have flammable vapors, if they're toxic fumes, et cetera, because remember, the kids come and go. You stay, period after period after period. Realize what you're doing to your body medically, especially your lungs, not good, all right? So ultimately, it'll probably be the maintenance department who they will contact their supervisors. And you also have a right under OSHA to request that they have a laboratory come in and test the air, all right? So I would advocate that you do that also. And don't be shy about it. And if they refuse to do it, you go to the union.
Thank you. Last question. So this is from a new CTE teacher. Has not been trained on the machinery in the shops and cannot find any manuals. How do they let the students use these tools if they're not certain how to use them themselves?
Tyler, don't be shy.
So the question was, if they're not trained.
Yeah, so they haven't been trained, and like, how do they help their students understand how to use their tools if they're not sure how to use them themselves?
So I think Ken, step in at a point, but they shouldn't be using equipment if they haven't been trained on it, the instructor. And so the first thing is to make sure that the instructor requests in writing to have some form of training from the district. They may have an OSHA person that works at the district, like in Ken's school district. He may be the person to go train that teacher on how to use certain things like a bandsaw, drill press, basic things that students can use. We're not talking like table saws and stuff to that extent, but basic things that they could be trained on, that they could do some engineering design activities, which this is a side note, but the number one item in our study that we found that was involved with accidents was hot glue guns. So believe it or not, out of all the equipment, everything that we see in STEM and engineering labs, hot glue guns were the number one culprit of injuries and accidents. So sometimes it's the little things that you don't suspect that, no pun intended, will burn you. So the teacher should be requesting in writing that they get some form of training, whether they send them for training from their district or from a course before they're showing students how to use equipment and do those processes in a safer way.
Totally agree.
Great. Well, thank you too. Appreciate your time, Dr. Roy and Dr. Love. And thank you to all the attendees. We appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us. We'll be sharing the presentation in the near future.